on this conveyor belt. Once on this conveyor belt, it's going to go through 4 different millers. The first miller is going to cut the agave into smaller pieces. The second one is a press where we're going to squeeze the agave. But a fun fact, if this is your first time visiting a tequila distillery, you can actually eat this cooked agave. It tastes a little bit similar to sweet potato or pumpkin. We're going to have the possibility of tasting it. If any of you are diabetic, you can consume this because the sugar is 100% natural, has 0 added sugars. Any questions? As fermentation, this is where we're going to start to change the sugar into alcohol. To make this process a lot quicker, we're going to add a microorganism which is known as yeast. This is going to eat the sugar and its waste becomes alcohol. So each tank has a capacity of 50,000 liters. We're going to add 5% of this natural bacteria. And once it eats the sugar, it's going to turn into alcohol, and this process can take from 40 to 60 hours. Once this is over, we obtain something that is known as agave wine or must. So this has an alcohol content from 10 to 16%. If you ask yourself, how about in proof? If you're from a country that uses the term proof, this would be the equivalent to 28 proof, from 28 to 32. So it's a little bit strong. It's just not recommended to drink it. Why? Because of the chemical reaction with the sugar in the yeast. It not only produces alcohol, but also produces sulfur. This is one of the reasons why many indigenous people, when they drank this, they would die because of the high contents of sulfur. Any questions? Sorry? Sulfur. Sulfur, it's a chemical that you can die if you eat it. You don't want to do that. The yeast, it comes from the plant. So they, in this case, we have an area that's called quality control, where they create more yeast constantly. So this is the natural bacteria that comes from the plant. Any other questions?
So once we have the agave wine or the must, it's injected into these copper stills. And if you ask yourself why copper and not stainless steel, that's because copper is a very good conductor of heat. So as it starts to boil, it's going to condensate, elevate, and it's going to go through this huge condensator on this right side, and this is where they can separate the alcohols. So tequila is generally divided into 3 different areas. We have the head, the body, and the tails. We can only consume the body, the head, and the tails. That's usually where you have most of the bad alcohols. So the first liquid that we obtain is after 3 hours. If you notice this liquid has a cloudy color to it, that's because this contains a lot of methanol. For people that don't know, methanol can leave us blind, so you definitely don't want to drink this. So what we're going to do is we're going to repeat the process again, which is going to be a lot slower. And this liquid, which is known as ordinary, turns into this after 6 additional hours. If you notice, this is what many people think when they hear the word tequila. Actually, you can call this tequila. The only difference, since it's directly from the still, the alcohol content is very high. This can have from 55 to 70% alcohol. So if you've ever asked yourself, what's the real flavor of tequila? This would be the real flavor because it has 0 added distilled water. So we're going to have the possibility of tasting this at the end of the tour. It's a little bit strong, but it's definitely worth it because usually here in Mexico, we do not sell this to the public. We only sell tequila between 35 to 40 degrees alcohol. So anything above, usually they charge more taxes to the company or the distillery in order to be able to sell it as a final product. Any questions? All these brands belong to José Cuervo, but what's more important is that whenever you buy a bottle of tequila, you really understand the information that is given to you. So for example, if you take a closer look at these 3 bottles or the ones in the bottom, in the label it says 100% agave. What does this mean? This means that all the sugar that was used comes directly from the agave plant. So if you ever buy a bottle of tequila and you see this is meant for you to drink it straight or neat. There's no need to add sprinkling water, soda, juice, or any of your drinks. Why? If you add more sugar, the next day the hangover is going to feel even worse. Okay? So if you ask yourself, what if I don't like drinking tequila straight or neat and I prefer something like a cocktail, let's say a margarita, tequila sunset, drinks like that, then you have the option of drinking this last one, which is known as José Cuervo Special. The difference between that one and the 3 previous ones, or the ones in the bottom as well, is that only 51% of the sugar comes from the plant and the other percent is added sugar, which is 49%. So this is what they use to compensate for the lack of the natural sugar. If any of you have ever tasted this brand, straight, to be honest with you, it doesn't taste very good because it's not meant for you to drink it that way. So once we understand these 2 categories, we have 4 official classes. The first one is known as a white tequila, or in this case in Spanish, blanco. It's known as white because it does not touch wood. So all they do is they add distilled water, it's bottled and sold. that would be a white tequila. If that white tequila, you let it sit in barrels from 2 months to 1 year, eventually it turns into a rested tequila, which in Spanish is known as reposado. You get this light gold color, and you taste the wood a little bit more. You lose the flavor of the agave slightly, just slightly. So if you let this tequila sit in barrels from 1 to 3 years, eventually it turns into an aged tequila or añejo. If you notice the color is a little bit darker, and if you let that tequila sit from 3 to 7 years, it eventually turns into an extrañejo. It's another brand, but it's an extra age. So remember, those are the two main categories. We have 100% agave, and the one is known as tequila. And then we have the classes white, rested, aged, extra age, which in Spanish would be blanco, reposado, añejo, and extrañejo. Any questions? No? And if you ask yourself, what is the best tequila? There really is no right or wrong answer. Why? Because everyone has different preferences. So if you want to taste the real flavors of the agave plant, you're probably more inclined towards buying a white tequila because this is the true flavor of the plant. If you think this is too harsh or it's just not your cup of tea, well, you have 3 different options, because remember, the longer it's stored in barrels, colors, textures, aromas, and flavors change. So you lose some of the agave flavor and you have more flavor of the actual wood. So it depends on how much you want those flavors to be and how intense and how strong you want the flavor of the wood to be. Then you either have rested, aged, or extra age. Any questions?
What's your favorite?
All of them. I think I drink all of them.
Good answer.
So which one is used for the margarita mostly?
This one. You would go with that one. This one, obviously, depending what distillery you visit, they're all gonna have their own version of that one. But you always have to remember 100% agave, straight or neat. If you don't see 100% agave on the bottle, that means that it's meant for you to drink it in a cocktail. Okay. Any questions? Scenario, we have these 3 barrels. If you notice, each one has different colors, a little bit darker than the previous one. This is known as light charring, moderate charring, and deep charring. So what do? Once the barrel's finished, before they actually put the lids, they sand down the interior, all that rubbish that they obtained, and the remains of the barrel, they position it inside and they slowly burn it. As it's burning, they're spinning it constantly till the whole interior is completely charred or burnt. You may ask yourself why? Because the longer you let it burn, the more intense the aromas will be. This is where you get aromas like chocolate, caramel, butterscotch, honey, banana. Many people think that they add these substances to the barrels during the aging process. They never do that. It's just the charring process and the aging, or the type of wood that you use, that gives each unique aroma and flavor. And for example, in this area, we have more than 3,000 barrels. Each barrel is made out of 2 different types of wood. It can be either American oak or French oak. The American oak comes imported from, in this case, Kentucky, and the French oak comes imported from Limousin, France. The American oak can give us cinnamon aromas, and the French oak can give us 2 different aromas. It can be chocolate or caramel. And these aren't the only barrels we use. For example, nowadays, tequila is so popular that what tequila distilleries do is they buy barrels from other distilleries like bourbon, whiskey, wine, cognac, and this is done with the purpose of trying to enhance and create different aromas and profiles. For example, if any of you are big fans of wine, there's this tequila called Tequila Rosé. It's a pink tequila. Many people think that they just add food coloring. It has nothing to do with food coloring. So what they do is they age tequila in red wine barrels, and that's where it gets its colors, textures, aromas, and flavors. So if you're a big fan of wine and tequila, most likely you're gonna like that tequila. Any questions? This is to make it a little bit easier to visualize how much we lose in an aging process. So a fun fact, this barrel was filled 10 years ago with white tequila. If you notice, it's not white anymore, and we've lost about 80% of the total contents. This is known in the tequila distillery, or in the tequila industry, as angel sharing. If you've been to other distilleries like bourbon, whiskey, wine, you can sometimes hear angel sharing or devil sharing. It literally means the same thing. Why? There's nothing that people can do to stop this process. It's completely natural. It's due to 2 different factors: evaporation and the natural properties of wood. So remember that wood always looks for humidity in the environment. What happens if we have no humidity? It's gonna absorb a lot more content, which in this case is the tequila, and we're gonna lose more than expected. Which roughly here in tequila, since it's a relatively warm place, we lose an average from 5 to 8% annually. Sometimes we lose more, sometimes we lose less. It depends on the humidity and the temperature. Yes?
And you blame the angels or the devil for taking the 8%.
Well, they blame it. I mean, we know that scientifically it's because of that, but that's the term, right? So, what's interesting is nowadays there's a very popular tequila called Cristalino. I don't know if it rings a bell. Maybe you've tasted it. So it's a white tequila, and many people confuse it, or in this case, don't know how to distinguish it between a Cristalino and a white. So remember, white tequila does not touch wood, and Cristalino was originally an extra-age tequila. The only difference, it goes through a filter of active carbon that this is used to remove the color and turn burning sensations. So as a final product, it's white, but when you drink it, you get zero burn. And nowadays it's very popular because many people that don't know how to drink tequila correctly, they drink it, and since they get no burn, they drink a lot more tequila in a shorter period of time, and they end up super wasted. Any questions? No? So if you ever see a bottle of white tequila that's as expensive or even more expensive than an extra age, most likely it's a Cristalino. Okay. And if you ask yourself why an Cristalino or an extra age tequila is a little bit more expensive compared to the other ones, that's because they're trying to compensate for some of the losses that they had during the aging process. Okay. Oh, and also this is one of the favorite places to take pictures. If you want to take pictures, I'll give you a few seconds. And he has many paintings and sculptures within José Cuervo. Actually, a fun fact, when you watch your bracelets, if you notice there was a huge crow outside, he made that sculpture. So here on the far left, we have the goddess on the way. It said that she's the first person that found this fermented drink, and she would offer it as a tribute to the kings and queens of her time. The next part, we have this indigenous family around the agave plant. That's because the indigenous people thought the agave plant had miracle qualities, but this wasn't true. What would happen is they would drink it, get drunk, and they would forget that they had certain illnesses or symptoms. The next part, we have the person with a crow on his forearm. This is to commemorate the founder of the company. His name was José Antonio de Cuervo y Valdez. If you know a little bit of Spanish, Cuervo translates to English as raven or crow. That's where we get the emblem or the icon, and the name of the company, José Cuervo, to commemorate the founder. The next part, we have this person that's studying the leaves from the agave. This person, their occupation is known as jimador, and the process of harvesting the agave is known as quema, which is spelled J-I-M-A. So once they finish with this process, with the pineapple or the agave is too big, they would cut it in half to make the cooking process a lot easier. They would use two types of ovens, the wall oven and the cone oven. Once the agave was cooked, they would take it to this huge stone wheel, which is known as taona. The taona was moved by mules or horses in a circular fashion, and this was used to squeeze the pineapple, and that's how they would obtain the agave juice. Once they had the agave juice, they would send it to this huge barrel. If you notice, there's a person inside. You may ask yourself why. That's because it said that at that time they would use the filthiest person in the village. Thanks to all the bacteria on their bodies, it would make this process a lot quicker. So once the yeast or the liquid was fermented, they would take it to distillation. Here's where they would separate the alcohols, and then they would just fill up the barrels to take either to the warehouse or to be sold. And the last area, we have a lot of ribbons. Each ribbon represents a country where José Cuervo sells his tequila, which is more than 100 different countries. And José Cuervo, biggest brand known internationally, is José Cuervo's